21 past the hour, continuing with the execution of Christopher Dorner. With a voluntary media blackout in effect, the Twitter sphere, punctuated with a plethora of indignant and sharply worded refusals to comply with the police, became one of the only sources of developing news. What we know about what happened thereafter owes almost entirely to those who scoured the web for scanner feeds from the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department and intently followed the story these feeds told. Shortly after 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, the cabin was engulfed in flames, with CNN helicopters broadcasting plumes of black smoke from a distance of 5 miles. A single gunshot is reported from within the house. A narrative quickly emerged among the mainstream media, which we should recall was conspicuously absent from the scene, that police agencies had only deployed tear gas and that perhaps Dorner himself had set the fire. Soon, what seems to be a cache of ammunition is exploding sporadically. But for those of us listening to the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department radio frequency, there was little question what had occurred. Nearly a half hour prior, officers had referred to, quote, going ahead with the plan with the burner, end quote, with another adding that the plan was to, quote, back the bear down and deploy the burner through the turret, end quote. Now, live audio during the preceding shootout seems to confirm this intention. Soon the message was straightforward and expected, quote, 7 burners have deployed and we have a fire, end quote. No surprise tones, no suggestion that the fire be extinguished. In fact, there was the exact opposite. A female voice on the scanner repeatedly asks if the fire crews should be allowed to approach and is told that it's not time yet, that we need to wait until all 4 corners are engulfed. Then that we need to wait until the roof collapses. At one particularly repulsive point, those on the scene realized that the house has a basement, and an authoritative voice, male voice, indicates that the fire crew would not be called until the fire had, quote, burned through the basement, end quote. They were going to let him die. References to the 1993 massacre at Waco, Texas, the murderous 1985 bombing of the MOVE organization in Philadelphia were immediate and will serve as opposing frames for Dorner's death in the days and weeks to come. A murder, an assassination, a lynching, an execution. This is the day of a million possible metaphors, but central among these should be the image of the burning house. In an effort to distinguish what he called the house Negro from the field Negro, Malcolm X once observed that the two responded differently when the master's house caught fire. Quote, but that field Negro, remember, they were in the majority, and they hated the master. When the house caught on fire, he didn't try to put it out. That field Negro prayed for a wind. End quote. While the metaphor may seem a strange one, given the fiery death of a man some have compared to a runaway slave, but as many Americans choose to gaze, mesmerized at the glowing embers of the Dorner saga rather than watching the State of the Union, it's worth wondering whose house is really on fire and who is praying for wind. The eclipsing of the State of the Union, with some networks airing a split screen of the president's speech alongside images from Southern California, or omitting pre- and post-speech coverage to report on Dorner's likely death, speaks volumes about our society. The conditions which produced Dorner and has helped produce a surge in mass killings generally. Persistent racist policies couched in the language of security and failed imperial ventures with war tactics reimported into American policing are routinely covered over by the trite conflicts of celebrities, whether they be the Kardashians or members of Congress. Dorner was not just a product of a racist police department. He also, no doubt, adored his so-called 15 minutes, stealing time from the president he nevertheless supported during the biggest planned speech of the year. Although Dorner's actions were not driven by a radical consciousness, they are, quote, as American as cherry pie, end quote, in an apolitical vacuum that, at least on the surface, resembles Oliver Stone's Natural-Born Killers far more than the political contexts of the 60s. As Obama was taking to the lectern, police agencies were insisting that they had not set the fire that killed Christopher Dorner, and the compliant media were parroting this clearly implausible message. As members of Congress stood and sat on cue to rapturously applaud the commander-in-chief, more than 14,000 people have liked just one of the Facebook pages in support of Dorner, some because they know what racist policing is like, some because ours is a time of resisting injustice by any means, and some simply for the joy of backing an outlaw to the grisly end.